The one thing I want to check before we go live is make sure that we're going live.
Oh, you mean on Facebook?
Yeah.
Can't
It takes about 30 seconds to
I
live.
feel like I need a booster chair for this couch. It's so far back. Oh, you're so tiny. Do you want another pillow? No.
Just we two are on camera.
I hope so. That was my goal, of sitting on the side of it.
You can't sit there.
You go ahead and sit there. I'll give you.
Because sometimes you have streaming issues, so you know.
No, just, I see mine. Just sit outside. That's not mine.
Hey, we are live. Well, that's another one.
Turn off my ringer.
I should have had mine.
Good idea.
Yeah, thanks.
Everyone is courtesy to the podcasters. Just turn your mic.
Funny.
We're live now. Oh, it's got the wrong definition on it though. I could change that. There's one person watching, which means it's probably me.
Some people might have tuned in and
Want
some
Want to push the plan out already.
people float in and out. Let me see here.
Now there's two people watching.
Should we have like a sign for applause and when to be quiet? Like,
Yes. Raise your left hand to
Yeah.
everybody applaud.
Well, there's people signing them on, so we're just going to get started.
Huh?
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Milk the Funk, the podcast live. I'm Art Whitaker, your host of Milk the Funk, the podcast, and a brewer at Von Site's Theoretic Ales. Tonight, we have with us Daniel Fernandez from Bean Curd Turtle Brewing in San Diego. Talk a little bit about yourself. Tell them who you are, what you do.
Oh. Well, I make beer. That I do that. Really,
It's going to be a good interview.
Yes. I started homebrewing back in '93 or so. And so for a long while I was homebrewing and it wasn't getting very interesting, got back into it right around, I think 2009 or so. And so I have a background in cooking. I had a little chef schooling and when I was in school and stuff like that. Didn't want to work that hard, so I went into business. But it interested me when I got back into brewing because of all the new types of things you could work with, the hops and grains and stuff like that. And I'm trying to make this a quick story.
We got all night long. Lots of food.
So I actually was trying to brew beer for a good friend of mine who didn't drink beer, didn't like beer. Never was successful in getting that done. She never liked beer, but she doesn't like beer at all, so that's a plus, not my fault. I'll beg that. But I found out after brewing for a while that because when I design something, I'm brewing to a concept. I have something in my head, I have a target where to go to. And I think the thing you really need to be able to do if you're going to do almost anything, including brew beer well, is to have a target, define a target. Because if you're not making a beer for a purpose to meet a target, it's just gonna be random, right? So you look for excellence, you look for a target, a concept for a beer. And I think what really helped after that is figuring out you also need a baseline, right? So to understand all the new hops, the new grains, things like that, I brew a baseline beer, which is basically all 2-row pale, Briess, and German Magnum, 60 minutes. So it's 1050 starting gravity, 25 IBUs of German Magnum, and 150 degree 60-minute mash. Super simple, super straightforward. And then if I want to test a different yeast, I'll swap the yeast out. Usually it's 05 or some plain cow one or something like that, some very plain ale yeast. But I can swap the yeast out and I understand that base beer, except the yeast has changed, right? So there I have a baseline. Or if I want a new hop, I can swap a new hop in, either late in a whirlpool or dry hopping or something like that. And I still have that foundation where, okay, now I understand what that hop is. And so I did this for a little while going forward. I'm already talking about how I design recipes, but about, I'd say 2011, 2012, I started brewing beer where I had a target in my head. I had a definition of what I wanted to produce, and then 6 weeks or 4 weeks, depending on the beer packaging, I'd taste the beer, and it was what was in my head. And that blew my mind. And predictably, I could say a concept in my head, and I get a little weird when I think about it, because I still think, how the hell did I do that? Right? Because I think a lot of people, when they first start brewing, they first don't have a concept, but if they do, when they put together a recipe, it doesn't end up coming out 4 or 6 weeks later, right? So when that happened, I'm moving on to what I do as Bean Curd Turtle. I went to Dallas and picked up a beer that came from Spain that had rosemary and honey and rosemary in it. In Spain, rosemary, honey, or at least in Valencia, when you say, oh, that's rosemary honey, it means that's the best, right? So there's a beer made with rosemary, honey, and rosemary. I found it in Dallas, took it back home to California, Southern California, and I said, oh, we have this beer out here in California. So I called the importer, and they said, well, we're not in California yet, but we'll try and do that. And they said, why are you so enthusiastic? And I said, because it's very original, and I make beer, I brew beer. And they said, why don't you bring some beer out next time you come to Dallas? So I brought some beer out, so liquid credentials, right? So you can't just say you're a good brewer. You got to show, you got to prove it with a product. So I went out there and with nothing in my head, the importers, they tried my beers and they said, well, we have a stake in a brewer in Spain. How would you like to go to Spain, design a beer for us and brew it there? And I said, hell no. Well, not really. So I went to Spain, and we traveled around Spain for a week trying different beers because they're trying to find new beers to import. We went to the northeast of Spain and tried their spontaneously fermented cider, which, have you ever had it?
This is Spanish cider?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, yes.
That's amazing.
Yes.
Yeah. So did that, and I went back to Valencia, and we brewed a beer called Valencia Saison. So that's the first commercial beer I was involved in. It became the highest rated Saison in Spain on Untapped, and it was like everybody was crazy about it because it's unusual for them. They had just started getting craft beer back then. And then it just kind of went from there. I brewed with several breweries in Europe, several in Spain. And then I more recently went out and brewed with Danny Prignon at Fantôme. Did a collaboration with Fantôme, 2 other breweries in the United States. So now, and I brewed for a short while, for a year, at a co-op brewery in Riverside, California. Small batch, and that was great, learning market and stuff like that. And so here I am, now at this point in time, it's fun for me to work with brewers who actually are open to sharing their space with me and bring something hopefully unusual and exciting. And I learn a lot from that.
Well, to a lot of people out there, Danny Prignon is a legend. Fantôme is a legendary beer in Europe and in the United States. What was it like to work with Danny? He's probably not watching.
No, Danny's really a character, and he's. I learned a few things, and talking with him before I actually went out to Europe to brew with him. First time I went out, it wasn't to brew. I actually sent a beer, sent friends back with a beer that I brewed, a very classic Saison, about 5%, not a bigger Saison. And I had friends who went back to Europe, and then they shipped it from Europe because it's really expensive to ship from here. Danny got the beer, and it was, he likes green bottles. Yeah. So it had a little bit of the green bottle thing going on, but it also had a phenolic thing from some Brettanomyces, bottled with Brettanomyces as a secondary fermentation. And he said, that tastes a lot like some of my beers because Fantôme gets that phenolic funk. And he also said, I don't like it because he doesn't like beer.
Yeah, that's a funny story.
Yeah, in general. But like we go to lunch with Danny and he has one of 2 things. It's either Coke or Westmalle Triple. So that Westmalle Triple is the beer he drinks, and it's of course very clean triple. But it was so first time I went out there and just visited with him. Second time he said, "Come out and we'll brew a beer." So I designed the aromatics for that beer, and then put together, and it's kind of like the aromatics for gin, or a precursor to gin called Geneva that comes from, it's a Dutch liqueur. So that beer has a bunch of aromatics: Chinese tea roses, German chamomile, juniper berries, a bunch of different things. But it was fun because a lot of times when you go out and brew with a brewer, then you're doing things that, you know, they want you to help or they don't want you to help. With Danny, I just showed up and I said, hey, I got some ingredients. I brought some Taiwanese tea roses. And I said, I'll do whatever you want, but I don't want to get in your space. I don't want to get in your way. So we just basically ended up sitting in the brewery, the tap room part, and shared beers. I think he had a sip off of 2 or 3 beers. I think I had a lot more beer than he did. But we had a great time, and it's funny because the morning before I went to the brewery, he said, so what kind of grain do you want for this? And I said, well, I like Dalmatian, the Phantom Dalmatian, because I think it would be a good complement for the aromatics. At first I was invited to go there at 7. Which would be, you know, seeing the grain in and the mash in and all, and what grain was being used. But later he called me, he just texted me and he said, can you come at 10 instead? So I missed the whole grain. So he's very secretive, right? You don't know what he's going to do with the beer. I know what the aromatics are in that beer. I don't know what the grains are. And if you ask him, he'll say in French, but he'll say, the ghost has its secrets. Ghost always keeps its secrets.
We should actually keep going. I'm going to go get the beer you brewed so we can show everybody. Here.
Oh, okay. All right. So that's the second one. So I think Danny, the most fun thing about him is he's sometimes people think he doesn't speak English very well or understand English very well. But when you spend time with him, you figure out he knows he understands people. He understands what's going on. But he's a character in that that's the second one. Actually, this is when I designed the beer. It's not really a collaboration, except for if he did something. He always does something different. I designed this beer and 3 different breweries brewed it. So he answers in English and pantomime. And it's wonderful to have a conversation with him because he's very expressive and a lot of fun to hang out with.
Let me interrupt real quick. For anybody out there who's watching live, and there's a few of y'all, if you have any questions to ask for Daniel, go ahead and type in the comments. We'll be able to read them, and then I'll be able to ask Daniel the questions as we go along here. So I just wanted to let people know how it works. Hey, Ed. He's watching.
Okay. So I think, every brewer I go to visit, every brewer I work with, I've learned a lot about one thing or another because we all do different things, right? And then most of them have wonderful personalities and they're very open and generous. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't let me in the first place. So Danny's a really great guy. And I'm probably going to go back in August and brew some kind of like super dark Saison with him. Something different.
Well, in a minute, as everybody finishes the beer, and we have a few people hanging around here tonight, so we'll pop this open and drink it, and you can tell us a little bit about the beer and how you went about design, what you did to this beer.
Okay.
Okay, as you start designing a beer, so you talk to a client. How do you go about deciding what you're going to brew? Do they tell you what they want, or how's that work?
What usually happens is I find out something about the personality of the brewer if I can. I find out something about what's grown in the region or what's popular in the region. Like Valencia, that was obvious. That's where you walk down the street in Valencia and there's orange trees on the street, right? It's just a wonderful place. So that was obvious it was going to be about oranges. And that one actually took a couple pilots because oranges... if you use just crushed oranges, after about 6 weeks they turn and the beer gets kind of murky and flat, the brightness goes away. So I did one pilot, and the second pilot I said, I'm not using oranges. What I'm going to do is I'm going to proxy oranges. So 2 different kinds of European orange peels, little lemongrass, rose hips for the ascorbic acid for the brightness, orange blossom honey, pull all those things together in the right supporting grain, and that beer 3 years later still, when you open it, smells like fresh oranges, right? And so that's the kind of thing that I do, is trying to find out something unique. I did a coffee porter in Spain in a town where they're popular for coffee liqueur.
Oh yeah, tell the story. I love this story. And I want this coffee, by the way. So go ahead.
Oh, okay. yeah. In Spain, they make coffee and they use a kind of bean called torrefacto, which they put the bean into the roaster and they put sugar in it. And the sugar caramelizes on the outside of the bean. It's very dark black and shiny. So it has a caramel character and dark chocolate kind of character. And it's a very strong aromatic bean. They only use about 20%. They mix it with their plain coffee, which is also gorgeous. So what I did for this beer in Spain is, first of all, I was talking to the brewer, who's a really cool guy. And he didn't quite have a concept, and he couldn't tell me, okay, what's done locally. So I had to research the city myself, and I said, okay, coffee. It was the first coffee porter brewed in Spain. This is 2014. They're like 10, 15 years behind the US, right? So Torrefacto Cafe, basically, I was going to Spain and we came up with a concept, how we wanted the beer to be. And it was a robust porter with ice. They got brown sugar, can't get molasses in Spain unless you get it in a rail car for cattle feed. So brown sugar and a robust porter, and then the coffee. And I was trying to figure out how best to use coffee, because sometimes coffee beers have a ancho chili kind of character, right? Like vegetable. And I tried a couple stone beers that had coffee but didn't have that. So I got a hold of Mitch Steele, who's also a really generous guy, generous brewer, and he'll give feedback, and he's giving his knowledge back to the community, which is great. Asked him how to use coffee. So I went to Spain and went to the brewery, and we brewed this really nice dark porter and crushed the beans, put some in it, flame out for an extraction, and then I left. I had to come back home, but I was finished fermenting. They crushed beans, sanitized them, and put them in like dry hopping. And not a lot. I don't have the measure with me, but it's a lot less than most people use, but you still get a really nice broad infusion of all the coffee flavors. So that beer turned out pretty terrific. And then I designed a beer for a brewery on Canary Islands. So somehow I got involved in that, involved in different things. I never went there. I'd like to go there someday. But that brewery did all organic beers. So they're getting organic grains and stuff. And I said, another thing Canary Islands is known for is herbs and spices. So they grow organic herbs and spices there. We put together something, and that's how that one went. So I try and find something, define a concept based on the personality of the brewer, or something from the local landscapes, a product that's used, and whatever. But once we design a concept,
Am I going to need a corkscrew?
cap and cork on Fantomes. And once you get to the concept, that's the important part, because then you can define your target. And like I said, doing anything, almost anything, designing beers or whatever in life, you got to define a target or you're not going to hit it. So.
Okay, talk about this beer, Ghost in the Kettle. Here, we're going to pop this open and share it.
Okay. Well, this time I was talking to Danny about doing a second collaboration, and then I know a brewer in Orange County who basically, what he said to me one time, he said, if it wasn't for Danny Prignon, I wouldn't be brewer, right? And then I was talking to Bob Sylvester as well, with Saint Somewhere, and so I talked to all three of them, and I said, I have an idea. I'm going to pitch it, see if you like it or not. I said, I'll do a recipe, and it's kind of a weird like cluster collaboration, but I'll do the recipe, and then I want you guys to take something, your personality or your yeast or something that brings something personal to that beer, and this is the beer. And it has a whole bunch of each beer each brewery that's actually released it. Very interesting.
Is it gonna blow up?
No, this is not.
Nice carbonation.
Yeah, this one is just about enough. So this one is it's really cool that a couple of different breweries brewed it, and each one it's a little different, but this one is really, I think, really developing really well.
Who brewed this one? I wasn't paying attention.
This one's Danny Pignon Fenton, and
Dan's okay.
yeah, and Barley Forge, a local brewery, and then it was brewed at Saint somewhere as well. But sometimes I guess his beer doesn't go exactly how he expects. Someday it may be rebrewed at Saint somewhere. But yeah, I might talk to the other collaborators on this one and see if they don't mind me sharing the recipe and just letting people brew it, because it's called Ghost in the Kettle because a lot of brewers, especially brewers from our generation, they know Fantôme. And a lot of them, if you talk to them, they'll say, oh yeah, I absolutely know Fantôme, and that's one of the first beers that really just blew my mind. So Ghost in the Kettle is just saying, for a lot of brewers, Danny is part of why they're brewing, and so there's a little ghost in everybody's kettle. That's that little tip of the hat to Danny.
Wow, this is classic Saison. I mean, 2ET, the aromatics, the phenolics on the beer. Don't you think, David?
Yes.
He's good. That's why I like him. Yeah, it's terrific.
Yeah, this one's developing nice.
So okay, say a brewery like Von Sites Theoreticals, which is why you're here in town. And we get together and decide we're going to do a beer and kind of go through the steps of what we did or how we decided, how you decided what we were going to brew.
Okay.
And I mean, because we brewed a beer today, guys, and it's going to be a knockout beer. We're going to talk about it. No secrets.
No secrets.
And
because it's fun.
And no matter why, you couldn't do the same thing anyway. You couldn't brew the same way we do. You can have the same recipe. Everybody's brewery is different. Everybody's methods are different. So no secrets. If what we tell you today, you can make a great beer doing it, I'm all for it. If I want to drink it.
And I publish recipes too. Right. People really like them. A couple I don't publish, but most of them, if somebody says, hey, I want to see that, a recipe of that, I'll publish it so people can, if you know how to turn the percentages and pounds per barrel and stuff like that into brewing numbers, you can do the same beer. Everybody's process is different, so the beers come out different anyways. So, what happened, there's a longer story to this Von Sites theoretical thing. There's this guy, Art Whitaker, that I met at
Farmhouse.
At Farmhouse, down in somewhere, Farmhouse as fuck too. I went into the tasting room late at night because I flew to Tampa from California. It takes 32 hours, I think. and then I got a rental car and I drove up to the brewery, and nobody was there. I'm thinking, oh, this big thing's happening tomorrow. Nobody's there. And then Art comes in with somebody else. I forget who it was.
I think it was Keston from Carolina Barnhouse.
Yeah. And we started talking, and then it was a good time. Nice. He's a decent guy. He's an art guy. He's all right.
Yeah.
So and then the next day,
I might ask my wife over here.
We don't have time for that.
next day was the Farmhouse as fuck, and everybody was putting their, whatever their yeast they brought in. Or
We'll talk about that later because we've got that beer.
Okay, yeah.
So talk about our beer.
Okay. Yeah.
How do you go about doing it?
So
But
we talked at the next day. We talked at the thing, and you're like a whirlwind, and meeting everybody, and I shared beers, took some stuff I brewed, and you said, hey, let's do something together. So it ends up, kept talking and trying to come up with a concept, knowing a little bit about Von Seitz, but not a lot. And then the yeast, I figured, okay, so you're using non-traditional yeasts or foraged yeast or captured yeast, something like that. In 2015, I got a wild capture from my backyard, from fruit, skin of fruit in my backyard, and it made some terrific beers. I brewed a couple of them for the small batch brewery I was working at. One of them I called Wild in the Sack. Then I did a super hoppy one, and naked dry hopping. So I called it hopping naked wildly in the sack or something like that. And so that yeast, I used it also. We used it at the Ghost in the Kettle locally. I had some of it. I shipped it out to you to be propped up, and I also had kumquats from my backyard, from a citrus tree in my backyard. And so I said, you guys, you're wild capture, you're foraging, and I said, I'm foraging from my front backyard. That's good enough, right? So
Absolutely, that's what we do.
yeah, concept came together, and
So yeah, he basically just were messaging, and he threw us some ideas, and we said, heck yeah, it sounds great, and it's right up our alley. I mean, we love using fruit and herbs, and especially novel yeast and wild yeast, and I mean, who can beat a local yeast from San Diego? And he described it, and you've had this yeast bank. Go ahead.
Yeah. This is a wild capture in 2015, and I did a couple of batches. It's always been really great. It's wild sac seed. They did DNA analysis after they isolated it. Two main organisms: the sac seed and Lactobacillus casei. The yeast, if you make a fermentable wort, easily ferments it below 1.0. I'm finishing at 0.997, 0.994 on some beers. Really low carbohydrates, residual carbohydrates. I've sent it to lab to be studied, and about 50% of residual carbohydrates are actually soluble fibers. So I was trying to brew beers with very low sugar content because I was diagnosed as type 2 diabetes, and the yeast just kind of folded into it, and it seemed like a stroke of luck, right? So that wild capture from my backyard is banked at White Labs as the mixed culture and as the isolated yeast, and it's a terrific yeast if you use it in the right kind of beer, and it's very aggressive. One time I tried to make a double IPA with it, or I did successfully make a double IPA with it, except for the fact that it fermented out down to about 1.002, and it was 11.3% instead of 9.8 or whatever I was targeting. So that yeast is it's a cool story, and it's on my on the website. The whole story is there about it, but you get, sometimes you just get lucky and things kind of fall in your lap, and that yeast is one of them that it's worked out well.
So, what the recipe was a Pilsner malt.
The recipe for
The beer we brewed today.
today? Oh, I have it actually.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can show you the aromatics too. Where is it?
So we got the grain. We had everything ready for us, and so by the time we got there, for all of you guys who brew with Alex, he starts about 5 o'clock in the morning, and so we showed up about 8:30, and the beer was already mashed in. So we didn't. And if you brewed with Alex, you know to stay out of the way.
Yeah.
He's a whirling dervish, and we've heard that term a couple times today, and he knows his equipment, and basically we're there to take the grain out of the mash tun and scrub a little of the kettle when it's done, and to try all the beer and drink beer and talk, and that's about what we did.
Yeah. Well, this recipe kind of will explain the way I work in designing beer too. It's very simple. 60% Belgian Pilsen, 20% Belgian wheat malt, 10% flake wheat, and 10% rye. And the reason I like to use rye when I'm doing these really low residual carbohydrate beers is because the beta glucans keep the mouthfeel up. it's not so thin and stuff like that. So when you get used to the ratios of rye that you want to use in different kinds of beer, especially if they go in a barrel, right? A barrel can totally rob body unless you have something more complex left. So that's a grain bill. And typically when I make a beer, if the hop isn't a big important part of it, then I just use Magnum at 60 minutes for a neutral balancing bitterness. That's it, because the other stuff is working. So this beer that we did today, it has kumquats in it at Flame Out. Usually I do the fresh fruit at Flame Out because I want it to be sanitized. And then it's going to have a little bit of cardamom, and it's going to have dry hopping with opal.
Yeah. And so what we did today is we did a whirlpool. We put a bunch of, if you go to the Von Sykes page, I took a picture of it. We have a little grant that we're working in as we're circulating the beer from the kettle before it goes into the heat exchanger. And so we threw a bunch of kumquats in there and macerated them and let it, and macerated some of them, not all of them, but basically just let the hot water just soften them up and pull oils out of it. And it smelled like, it was a gorgeous smell. If the beer if the final beer holds half that aroma at the final end of it, because when it starts ferment, it's going to drive some of these volatile aromas off. But hopefully we can get some of the aromas. Plus the yeast has a very nice fruity smell to it too. So we're excited about this beer. It'll be dry hopped with opal.
Opal, because opal has sometimes a little character of wintergreen or menthol, and mint is more characteristically defined as mint, which should balance against the cardamom. Cardamom is very savory, so a little brightness from the hops should be nice, and with fruit too.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun beer. And then we dumped whatever oranges we had left over in the whirlpool into the fermenter to let them get everything out of there.
Except the two I took.
Yeah, he did the two you ate.
Yeah.
And then of course we've got more that are frozen right now, and those will be more fun. The way we do it at Von Sykes, some people, he had mentioned putting it into the barrel. We don't like to put whole fruit into our barrels because then we got to get it out. And it's not much fun. We don't want to take the barrel apart. And so what we usually do is we'll boil it, macerate it, and basically make it to a slurry and pour it in there. And we're still getting all the sugars, we're still getting all the juices, but it mixes into the beer a lot better. We get almost all the sugars and the juices from the fruit, and it comes out, and basically it's into the beer, and it's not left hanging around in the barrel. So that's a method we've used over the years when we're using fruit, and I'm really excited about this beer. We'll just see. We put it to a stainless fermenter. We have a gin barrel that smells fantastic.
Yeah.
That we've got from Tarek, a friend of ours who owns a liquor store, he goes up to the distilleries and around Kentucky and all that, and picks out his own favorite barrels and has special whiskeys, single barrel whiskeys just made for out of that barrel. Goes around tasting, and of course they always deliver the barrel. He'll call us up and say, "Hey, I got this barrel. It's done. We got the whiskey out of it. You want to make a beer with it?" And we'll go look at it. And if the barrel's in halfway decent shape, we'll smell it, and we smelled this one and said, "Yeah, we'll do that." And all he asked for is to make sure he gets some bottles out of the beer, so it's a great deal for us.
Yeah.
And but go ahead. I guess we go ahead now. Go ahead and talk about how you. We talked about that design of beer, but go ahead and do your process.
Okay. Well, let me say one thing first.
Yeah.
You're the guy who's known for using sous vide in brewing.
Yes.
So one way I use sous vide in brewing is if I'm using fruit late, I'll of course freeze it, put it in a bag and vacuum seal it, and then bring the fruit up to pasteurizing temperature. When it's in the bag, it's not blowing off all the volatile oils and stuff like that.
Interesting.
So I do the same thing for coffee, same thing for cocoa, cacao nibs, and all of these aromatics that might bring some kind of bacteria to the finished beer. So you can get them up to 165 or so for about an hour and cool them back down, and then you puree them, and you don't have all this. You haven't blown off all the oils and boiling them, and you can get all that into the beer or into the barrel or whatever. That works pretty well for me.
before you get into design, we're going through your process. We're going to open another beer here,
All right.
and we've been excited about this beer.
Oh.
And we've talked about the story. St. Somewhere Brewing is in Tarpon Springs, Florida, and it's owned by Bob Sylvester, who is known especially in the alternative fermentation for making fantastic old world saisons. And every year he has an event where he invites the top farmhouse beers from farmhouse breweries from across the country down to Tarpon Springs. And this was the second year, and fortunately enough, we've been invited to go. That's how I met Daniel. And so everybody brings an ingredient they use in their beer. And then we always have to bring at least 2 bottles of a beer that we have a alternative type, mixed fermentation type yeast in it. And at the end of the day, we drink it, but you always have to save a little bit of the bottle, the dregs. So basically, they have a mash tun, and people are throwing in crazy things now. Sometimes with Mitch Ermentanger from Speciation L's, the first year bought snow. He brought a cooler of snow. It was snowing like crazy in Michigan, and so we threw the snow into the thing. We had this year they brought Faygo, the soft drink. We've had waffles, syrup, donuts, bagels go into the mash tun, just crazy stuff. And then after that's mashed in, it's still beer. It's just got crazy sugars. Then it's pumped over to the fermenter, and then we start putting in the dregs of our beer. So it's a combination of, this year I think it's 34 breweries, something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah, would pour their, and it's on the back of the bottle here, yeast into it, and then it ferments out, and then 5 to 6 to 7 months later, depending on, for us, mixed fermentation beers, the beer's ready when it's ready. There's no time that it tells you when it's ready. And so this is the first time I got a bottle sent to me from Florida. This is the second edition of Farmhouse as Fuck. Excuse my language, but that's what it's called. And this is called Farmhouse as Fuck Do for 2. And David and I will be going down here in about a month or so for FAF3 and TWA, I guess, yeah. And it's a fun event. And so we've never tasted this beer.
You had a Kvike ring, if I remember correctly.
What?
At the Farmhouse's Fuck 2, you had the. Yeah.
Well, our thing that we put into our ingredient, of course, we do a lot of gruit ales and do a lot of herbs. So Alex weaved a gruit ring. It was a wreath, like a little wreath about that. And he took a lot of the wild herbs like lemongrass, lemon balm, yarrow, sage, a lot of things, and weaved it into a ring. And then we dipped it to one of our beers that had Kvike in it. And then we pulled it out, and he hung it over a fire to dry it out so the Kvike would dry out there. And we put it in a plastic bag, and it smelled fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, they had people picking up the smell in the bag, and that was the last thing that was thrown into the beer. So there was a little Kvike yeast from one of our beers, and of course all our herbs and spices, and that was our thing. Now this beer, from what I've heard, we just recorded Milk the Funk, the podcast the other night, and it was the Saison edition. It was with Bob Sylvester at Somewhere and Sean Johnson, The Birds Fly South. And it was a 2-hour podcast. You guys would be thrilled. I can't wait for the comments. I mean, we learned a lot of stuff. There was a lot of great discussion about it. He says this is a pretty sour beer.
So my contribution was a half pound of Taiwanese tea roses, and I propped up a half liter of the wild yeast from my backyard.
So you have not tried this beer either, right?
No.
So
I'm really excited to.
And we also talked on the Saison podcast about Bob Sylvester's carbonation method, which is perfect again.
Yeah.
So, and I think Bob had mentioned, I guess we'll taste it and find out, pass this around. Again, Bob Sylvester, perfect pour, perfect head on.
That's what I use when I bottle condition.
Yeah.
It's just method.
Wow, he said there's a little acetic acid going on, which just happens in a lot of sour beers. So, and acetic acid for people out there is vinegar, basically.
There's like a ton of fruit in the aromatics, the sour stuff.
Yeah.
Almost like a Flanders in the complexity.
It's sour, but it turns into fruit really fast.
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
Tastes like a kombucha.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
I'm getting biscuits and gravy.
Wow, that's really great.
That is. That's better than some of the people described it. And Bob was, concerned that they might be too sour. And it's sour. There's no doubt about it. It's on the higher end of a sour scale, but it's not it's not ripping the enamel off your teeth or anything.
Cleans
like
up
that.
fast.
Yeah, and
It's
got
like
and I really love it. It hits a sour note, but then it feels like a bunch of fruit hitting your tongue. So yeah, this is a fun beer. You gotta have a taste of this beer, though. There's no doubt about it. If you don't like sour beer, you're not gonna like this beer. But that's interesting. Okay, let's get into design. This is what we're here for. Talk about how you work through. You've talked a little bit about it, but just really get into it. This is what we're here for now.
Right.
All two people that are watching this live
All
right
two
now.
people. Great.
They'll all watch it later and think that it's all about timing.
Yeah, like I mentioned before, I think there's two things that every brewer needs to have, and that's a baseline understanding the ingredients, and then when you're making a beer, a target. And I think a lot of brewers, when they first start brewing, they come up with a clever, for example, they come up with a clever name, and they say, okay, I gotta make a beer for that name. It's not really a concept for a beer, right? Some great beers can come out of it, but others, who knows? Or they find some funky ingredient and they say, I gotta make a beer with that ingredient. So my philosophy is, and I think it's getting lost now, if I drink enough, I'll really complain about it, but people are losing, the market is losing the sensibility for what a beer is at the base, right, at the core. And so I think that's important also in designing beers, understanding what a good beer is, even if it's a simple beer. That's why I start with something, like I said, pale, US 2-row pale, Magnum at 60 minutes, and a cal ale yeast, so a very clean ale yeast. Once you know what that is, then you can change out the grain, you can change out the hops, you can change out the yeast, and learn the characters and how they play against each other. And then another thing, using herbs and stuff like that. I'll make a tea. I've made tea with wormwood, tea with all different kinds of herbs, just so I know what it tastes like, sometimes mixing them. And my advice on that is don't make a tea with wormwood. But otherwise, you won't know the flavors unless you've tasted them and sometimes put them together. And also, if you're using an ingredient like cardamom or something like that, very powerful ingredient, you can measure this much water, this much cardamom, put them together and say, okay, if I scale that up, what's the impact going to be on somewhat the impact's going to be on the end beer. So I think it's really important that you understand your ingredients. If you don't know an ingredient, and even if you get a recipe from somebody, find some, make a tea, put things together, develop your palate. I think a brewer with a broader palate and better understanding of different kinds of drinks, different kinds of beers, different kinds of fruit, cocktail, whatever, food, it broadens your ability to say, okay, here's my concept, how am I going to get there? So it's kind of like a project management process. I got this thing. I have this thing I've defined in the future. I love beer. It's going to have these characteristics: the body, the color, mouthfeel, what flavors you want it to have, coffee or whatever herbs you want it to have. You define that first, and then you start working back. And if you don't know something like how strong is wormwood, how bitter is wormwood, and might use a little, then you figure it out. Because if you don't figure it out, trust me, with wormwood, for example, you'll just kill the beer. So that's my process, is defining where I'm going and then working back from that and using what knowledge I have and filling in. Even on a simple beer, like an IPA, right? People make IPAs that have a lot of crystal malts, so they're kind of luscious and full, or they make IPAs really clean body, and then you're not using crystal malts. You may use something else for complexity, but again, it's defining where you're going first, I think. And it's, like I said, in my process, it took a while, but when I actually once had the concept in my head, designed the beer, brewed the beer, and then a few weeks later sipped it, and that's what it was, that kind of blew my mind. Exactly what was in my head. Second time I did it, I went, okay, there's got to be something wrong, because we're so used to not getting a beer exactly how we want it to begin with. But it's really cool when you're there, and I, sometimes I feel kind of humbled that I can do that. And every time, like brewing with Von Seitz today, the wort tasted great, had all the great aromas. From every indication, I think that's going to be a really great beer. But something in the back of my head, probably from brewing beer for so long and not getting it perfect, is going, what's going to go wrong? But yeah, so that's a simple process. I don't know if there's anything more detailed or something, any questions about details.
Does anybody here have any questions? I mean, I know y'all, Rick and Vanessa, you're getting ready to open a brewery up, and Trisha brews great beer and gets and has been opportunities to go judge at the Great American Beer Festival or help out. But still, yeah. And of course, you'll be at NHC. If you got any questions about designing, making beer that you could ask, you want to ask Daniel right now, that just off the top of your head?
Off the top of my head, I mean, what he's saying makes sense. You gotta understand your baseline beer. When you brew something, just either single malt, single hop,
Mm-hmm.
you gotta understand that before you can start adding the complexity and the other things to it. It makes a lot of sense.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, I brew like I cook, little this, little that. So I'm doing the opposite of what you're doing. I'm like, what's this going to turn out? And then like, oh, that's not what I thought, but what can I do to make it there after it ferments? But as you're talking about designing the recipes for different places, I don't get that technical with like my water profile. Whatever comes out of the jug or whatever comes out of the tap, that's what I'm going to use. But as you're building your recipes, like how do you, at a professional level, how do you incorporate that? Or do you even worry so much about that?
It depends on the target. It's like one of my favorite, I told Art last night, one of my favorite stories is there's a group about Saison on Facebook, and some guy asked the question, does anybody have recommendations for a water profile for a Saison? And there's all kinds of recommendations. I actually have a specific water profile for a Saison, because I always start with RO water if I can. But I didn't answer because I knew there was going to be a whole bunch of answers. And about 10, 13 answers in, Bob Sylvester answered wet. Right? And you're the kind of brewer, I have a small group of brewers that gets together and we really do hard critiques on each other's beers, because you can't always get good critique on your beer. Either somebody doesn't want to say something bad, or, so we have this pact, if it's crap, tell us, right? And even if I love it and you don't, how would you change it to make it a better beer? So we have some people like me. I've been through the Steagall World Brewing Academy course. So there's water profiling, grain profiling, brewing to different gravities, all kinds of things in that course. And one of the things it did is it made me very meticulous. And when I was brewing at a co-op, the other brewers called me Mr. Meticulous. Not to my face, but I found out they called me Mr. Meticulous. And then I went out to brew at Saint Somewhere and at Danny's place in Belgium, and you see people that are just embracing the character and personality of the brew house and making it terrific beers, right? So I had to break that down and say, okay, don't be so meticulous, Daniel. But for me, water profiling is important on some beers. Like I brewed an Italian Pilsner recently. And water profiling was very important for me on that, because the water that's local is so high in carbonates, you'll never get the brightness from the hops to just pop and stuff like that. So when I'm water profiling, it's actually very simple. I make sure I have the right minerals that account for the health of the yeast. That's the primary thing. The cliche thing is we're not really doing anything, we're just making a happy home for yeast. It's very true. So minerals, I get the right minerals, minimums for yeast health, and then in the case of the Italian Pilsner, I said, okay, I want this ratio of sulfates to chlorides. How's the water going to present the brightness of the hops? So that's actually very simple compared to somebody who's going, okay, this mineral, I want this many parts per million, this mineral, I want this many parts per million. As long as you understand the concept I'm going to be good to the yeast. Because it's going to be crap beer no matter what I do. No matter how fancy my water profile is, if I haven't taken care of the needs of the yeast, it's going to be crap, right? So that's what I do. I think everything I do, even the way I mash and stuff like that, and the nutrients I use and the oxygenation and stuff like that, I'm looking out to making the best environment for our little happy billions of friends that turns it into beer. And then I'm a little concerned about the sulfates, chlorides. If it's a darker beer, then I'm looking into sodium and stuff like that for more unctuous mouthfeel or more umami, something like that. But not very complex.
Like today, our water profile was
Wet.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's gonna, and if you're in the right place and stuff like that, it's gonna be great.
We have good water and pretty high mineral content water here in Middle Tennessee, and it's a good brewing water. Depending on the style, you might want to, change your profiles. Like porters and IPAs have sometimes a little bit of a different profile. But for a brewery like ourselves, too, we consider it part of the terroir. The water is our terroir. Our water is what our water is.
Right.
Now, saying that, the last beer we brewed, we changed the water. We were messing around with a little bit of a Pilsner, farmhouse Pilsner recipe, and we wanted the hops in a Pilsner to be crisp because in a Pilsner you can't hide anything. You're an excellent Pilsner lager brewer.
Water profile for me. I mean, RO all of our water.
Yeah.
Baseline.
Yeah.
Water is extremely important for those type of beers because if it's not right, the hops are floppy in there, and a good Pilsner is going to have a crispness to it. It's going to be clean. The hops are going to have a little bit of a bite, just a clean bite, but not overwhelming. But it's. So there are instances, and there's water software out there like Brewing Water and things like that. You can get your water profiles from your local communities or get water and send it to Ward, and they'll do it. But most people just most home brewers do not mess with their water, and in a lot of cases, it's as long as you try to either filter your water or you use a Captain tablet. The basic thing is to try to get rid of your chlorine and chloramines.
Yeah.
And the chlorine would kind of go away even from the boil.
Mm-hmm.
The chloramines are the big thing, and that's what the Captain tablet really helps out to drive away all that stuff. So it doesn't affect you.
You can drop out the carbon. Also, if you have a high carbonate water, you can basically heat the water beforehand, the day beforehand, and the carbonates will drop out.
Oh, okay.
Like when you boil high carbonate water, for example, you get that white dust on the bottom.
Right.
So there's breweries that they're not going to invest. They don't have the capital to invest a bunch of money in water equipment. So they'll do those tricks like that. They'll fill the hot liquor tank the day before, bring it up to temperature, and let it sit and let the carbonates drop out. But me, for water profile, because I design beers for for breweries in other countries, for example, if the brewery has the ability to send me their water profile, I'll recreate it,
Okay.
what they're using for water, because I always brew a pilot at home, right? We do the concept, put together the target, and then I'll try and match the water profile so that the pilot beer is going to be exactly as I can where it's brewed, and I scale up from the equipment I have at home as well.
Gotcha.
And I've done it many times. Gone from I brew 5 gallons at home on a very controlled system, and it's all the same type of equipment, stainless, and the tubing is silicon. It's all like a big brewery, and I'm able to scale it up 10 barrels, 15 barrels, whatever, and the beer is almost exactly the same, which has worked out great for me. Because I want to know the beer's going to be great before I do it when I can. Some people, like on sites, and they went with trust on me, I went with trust on them. We kind of know what we're doing. And so, and not so meticulous.
I want to introduce, Daniel hasn't met Ryan Steagall.
How you doing?
Hi.
Ryan's with,
Nice to meet you, Ryan.
Ryan's with Overall Brewing and Blending, and for those out there, the 27,000 members of Milk the Funk, Ryan is Milk the Funk member #1.
Pretty much.
He's the founder of Milk the Funk, and so he's the one that started the whole thing about a little over 6 years ago.
just come here to listen in live.
Yeah.
So I couldn't stand seeing y'all through the screen. Had to be here.
We have our first question from the internet. Nuno Perea, I know I've blown your name, Nuno, but he goes, any advice when using fruit like strawberries in a Berliner Weiss? Doesn't the flavor get off the beer quick?
Yes, and yes, but no. So I think berries and stuff like that have a very delicate aroma, delicate aromatics, delicate flavor. The best way that I've found to use them is to freeze them, and if they're crushable by hand or by, I have a machine that I actually kind of macerate stuff in. It softly just pummels it. You get in home brewing, it's easy enough. Larger scale, then you have to get larger bags or larger equipment. So I freeze it so the cells are broken. I pulverize it, not to a puree, because especially strawberries, you don't want the seeds in it.
Right.
You break the seed, then you'll get the
Plastic.
bitter, you'll
Yeah.
get the bitter stuff in the middle. So I basically pulverize it, but don't break the seeds. It's not blending it or pureeing it. And then at Whirlpool, and I've used a lot of berries this way, you put them into a big bag, or if you're a big brewer, they actually make bags big enough for like 7-barrel systems where you can get them into the system. And at flame out, you put that fruit in there. Hey, this one's glowing.
That's the way it's supposed to be. Bob would love that. I heard y'all mention Bob earlier too.
So you put that at the Whirlpool and check your temperature, and usually, unless you have way too much fruit, it'll be above 180, and so you're sanitizing it. You may, in recirculating in a Whirlpool, put some of the wort back into the bag, so you basically you're pulling the aromatics and flavors out of it. But since the temperature drops, you're not boiling it, you're not losing a bunch of the aromatics. And then by the time it's done through fermentation, it becomes stable. So I've done berry beers that carry the berry character, fresh berry character for years. As long as you get it in a way that's not infecting your beer in the wrong way, and in a way that's not going to blow off all the aromatics. So that's what I do with fruit.
Okay, Ryan brought a couple beers over, and so,
Andrew, so got this recipe. Andrew from the
Atkinson,
farmhouse, yes,
and
from the
Saison,
farmhouse
yeah.
session.
Kathleen.
Yes, so that was his base recipe and my own little twist of hops. But first time I really ever dealt with spelt. Definitely imparts something different I've never had before. And this is also done with OLY 500, which is that hybrid between the French Saison and a Belgian yeast that
And
Omega did.
And for the Milk of Funk people who haven't met Andrew, Andrew lives in Mississippi, so he's lives in the wasteland of craft beer. And he's one of the administrators. I don't know if he's a founder of the Saison beer group, but he's one of the administrators. And we've traded beers over the years. When I go down to Mississippi on business, I'll meet up with him and I'll take some of our beer and we'll trade up. And he makes unbelievable farmhouse style beers. And Kathleen is one of his base, like I said, his base.
Yeah, I don't know if I did it justice. Again, first time dealing with OLY 500 as well. So
I like that.
it's got a lot of phenols. It went extremely dry, a lot of spice on it.
Well, it's very dry, but I think we were talking about this today with Alex about spelt. I think we were a big fan of spelt. It keeps the body, when you're having, and of course, when a beer gets very dry, it gets thin. And so, that's why we use wheat and
Oats and
rye and oats and things like that. But we were able to get a bag of stout last year, and it just really gives a great body to the beer. And so, yeah, this is really nice.
It's crazy. Yeast is.
I mean, the yeast is really powering through there. I was really surprised by the amount of Belgian character that was still there, also with the spice on that. So that's their hybrid, that he, I don't know how long ago it was released, but supposed to be the kind of the best of both worlds. I think it was come out the most powerful of both worlds in my attempt, but maybe in temperature or something like that. But anyway, I think it turned out pretty good. Not so bad.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's pick up where we left off. When we got over we dealt with the strawberries. And strawberries, it's a very delicate fruit. It's hard to get strawberry flavor into a beer. You got to use a lot of
Yeah,
strawberries.
we use a lot. Yeah.
And one of the biggest things that people have complained about is, and I think we've had enough talk on Milk the Funk to narrow it down, and we think it is the seeds. The seeds are what when people brew this strawberry beer, they get a plasticky Band-Aidy flavor and more. We've had enough feedback. I mean, I'm not a chemist. I'm not going to say that that's the reason, but we've had a lot of people who said, this is what I do and I don't get that flavor. Other people said, this is what I did and I got that flavor. And, you know, and I'm sure the microbiologists in our group can figure this out and tell us what it is. And, you know, this is where I need Dan Pixley and Matt Hunbar.
Sure. And you were talking about sous vide earlier. Has anybody tried to sous vide strawberries for a given time and then? Is that what you were saying?
Well, that's what he was mentioning. Adding fruit late. The kumquats I brought probably not a bad idea because it comes from the same yard where I got the yeast from. I got the yeast that we use from fruit in my backyard. So in my mind, if you want to go pure terroir, puree that and put it in the barrel. But there's that factor where you put so much work into it and maybe you just screwed up your whole batch of beer.
Yeah.
Things I haven't done it with fruit yet, but you mentioned you were going to boil fruit. Any aromatic I put in late, I vacuum chamber sealer, and you can use any regular sealer, and I seal them up, and then I use a sous vide, get it to 165 for about an hour, so I know it's basically pasteurized, but I haven't lost all the aromatics and stuff like that. So for coffee, cocoa, vanilla beans, stuff like that, it's really good because when it cools back down, it still has all those aromatics. Where if it's hot enough, you can just take it and pour it right in the fermenter, right? You can just open the bag and put it in.
I mean, this is kind of getting away from the funk, but a Beta Brewing Company down just north of New Orleans, around, I guess it's around St. Patrick's Day. That's when they brew their strawberry harvest there. And I've gone there, and it's the most amazing smell. Talk about permeate an entire brewery. They've got strawberries, and they're macerating them, and they're.
When did you go? When was this? When did you go?
This was probably, it was before, like probably 5 years ago was the last time I went.
You know,
amazing.
I don't want to knock Beta, and I've heard rumors that because as they've grown, that beer's grown, that they've changed to strawberry puree. If anybody knows better, I know that. I've loved the Beta strawberry beer. It's one of the best strawberry beers out in the market. But I've heard that you've heard this happens at a lot of breweries as they're getting bigger. You can't find the fresh fruit, and it's more efficient and more cost effective to use a puree or an extract. And I've heard rumors. If any Beta people are out there, you're welcome to type on here and type on Milk the Funk. Say that's not what we do. We use real strawberries. Sure. I don't know if you want to give away all your secrets, but
well, I mean, when I was down there, I mean, like I said, it was probably 5 or 6 years ago. They had just a lot of strawberries, just a little bit of water, and they were just kind of mashing them gently in a kegel, basically. Mm-hmm. They had like 4 or 5 of them going, and it was just full, and they were just slow, kind of getting them up to temperature, ready to pitch in there. Just I don't know, just bringing up the natural sugars or what they were doing. But it was pretty amazing, and that actually is a really awesome place. If no one's ever been here to that place, I mean, when I went, they just let you behind the bar, you poured your own thing. I mean, it's just party town down there, right?
Yeah.
So, but anyway, they do a really good strawberry beer, and I always thought it was interesting to go there during that time, during the Strawberry Festival and Harvest, and that's when they make that beer. So.
Yeah, one of the favorite beers when I was brewing at the co-op, it was a beer I called Buried Alive. And that's I use frozen strawberries. So it's you can use frozen, it doesn't need to be fresh, because you're going to freeze them anyway because you want the cells to break. As long as you have the equipment. And I actually have a friend who's he works in food packaging. He's a corporate chef. You can get brewery size equipment for vac sealing and temperature circulation, stuff like that. But for home brewing levels, you can get stuff at home to do it too. But that's always, I think, the challenge when you're dealing with something that has a lot of aromatics, is how do you use them if you don't want what might possibly be in that to change the character of beer. You know where your beer is going, hopefully, right? you know where it's going to be at the end of primary. If you want to put it in after the fermentation, you want to control the variables like bacteria and stuff like that.
Oh, Nuno has another question. Okay. Thank you. We appreciate that. And Dan Pixley is finally watching, I guess. What's the best way to use roasted barley to avoid that typical harshness? End of mash, when raising temperatures to mash out from the beginning of mash. Any advice? Thanks in advance.
We talked about that today, Art. We did. And
You know me, I wasn't paying attention. I was probably running my mouth.
so really, like you said, there's two different objectives for roasted barley. Sometimes, for example, for an Irish red, you're just using it for color. There's a little bit of character and stuff like that, but you're just using it for color. And as a little addition doesn't really matter. If you're doing a big stout and you're blending your dark grains well enough, you can just put them in your mash the old school way and make it happen. The few porters that I've designed for other breweries, in Europe they weren't really, like in Spain especially, they're 10 years behind. So, and I've done a couple other porters here as well for commercial releases. But what I always do for Baltic porters or robust porters, either one, is I cold steep the black grains, while I'm mashing the other grains. Most of your black grains have no extract in them anyways. The Maillard reaction so far, that's why they're black. There's no extractable sugar. So I cold steep them so they're basically at the same water to grain ratio that's done in the big mash with the grains that have extract, and then just before boil off, put them in. And it's a funny experiment because of at one brewery especially, we did that, and your runoff going to the kettle looks like a regular beer, and the brewer looks and he looks at me and he looks at me, and I said, just wait. Because all of a sudden it's like boom, yeah, boom, and then all this dark stuff's coming through, and you guys have a little trust. But yeah, if you cold steep the grain, same ratio as you're mashing, and then put it in a Vorloff, then you'll get the color out of it, and you won't get a lot of the if you're using a lot of it, you won't get a whole lot of roast out of it. And of course, then there's the debittered malts like the Carafa 3 and the Midnight Meat and stuff like that. They're both terrific malts. They'll still contribute some of the stuff, but not like Black Patent or something else. But if you really want a smooth, really dark beer, and I mean like black, like you can't see through it, but still smooth. I told you this last night. A buddy of mine asked me to make a beer. He said, I want, and he's the kind of guy who always argues with everybody, and he can give an opinion, and he comes up with the opposite, even if he doesn't have the opposite opinion. Yeah, so he's like the devil's advocate. Even if he doesn't believe what he's saying, he's gonna be that. He says, Daniel, I want you to make a beer. I want you to make a beer and call it Because Fuck You. And he said, I want you to make it the roastiest motherfucking beer, and I want you to make it the bitterest beer you can, right? And so I wasn't really into it. But he kept hammering on me. So finally I did it, but I tried to do it in an elegant way because I didn't want it to be undrinkable. And cold steep grains, a lot of big dark grains, a lot of hops, and it ended up being a really, really nice, big, full, like a voluptuous Cascadian dark ale. Like on accident, it was like, wow, this is pretty freaking amazing. But I still called it BFU because I didn't want to. It's kind of like that late one,
Farmhouse.
Farmhouse says, yeah.
How long are you cold steeping them? Just during the mash?
Same,
60-minute mash
yeah.
schedule?
Yeah. So once I'm mashed in, once I'm doughed in, got the temperature right, then the black grains, put
It
cold
goes
water
to
on and let it sit.
Okay.
Yeah, it works really well. And also, it's interesting. The runoff from the black grains is like very syrupy, almost like there's sugar in it, but it's
No, yeah.
yeah.
You're just getting the color.
I'm going to change the topic just a little bit. This, if you don't mind talking, this is a discussion we had last night that I found extremely interesting while we were smoking cigars. And liquid smoke, free advertising. You could pay me tomorrow. We were talking about pilsners. It's one of the as a sour brewer, as I've gone to sour beer events, in Carnival Botanomyces, Funk Collective, Funk Fest that Brandon Jones has, Farmhouse, even, at the end of the day, you find all these sour brewers showing up and drinking Pilsners and lagers. And so,
Because they're good.
well, that's it is good, but it also because after a while you need Altoids or something like that, and you're just wanting something to clean. Our next podcast at Milk the Funk is actually going to be called Pilsner, and
And we saw it coming years ago, right? And the unfiltered Pilsner.
yeah, but I was fortunate enough. I was down in Peru. Me and Karen got to go to Peru, and it was because of the podcast, to go down there and speak about Milk the Funk, and also help judge the beers in the Copa Latina America de Cervezas Artesanales. You guys taught me well down there, and it was a great thing. The people in Peru are fantastic. The food was amazing. On the sour beer side, right now most of the brewers, as I was judging the beers, their acidity was a little bit low. And they were telling me, well, because we're just now getting a sour beer, the people aren't used to it. I said, but then try this beer. And this is not my beer. I mean, we did a bottle share. That yeast will be coming out shortly. For the Americans, it's a fantastic yeast. It's so fruity. It's amazing. We got a brewer I gave the yeast to approve before I left, and he's brewing a beer with it right now. But a couple of brewers hit the mark with the acidity and the fruit, and the beers are fabulous. And once the South American brewers embrace the acidity, sorry Brandon, and embrace the acidity, and the fruit that they have in South America is unbelievable. There's so much it puts the fruit that we're brewing with here in the Americas and Europe to shame.
Yeah.
And once those guys, they've had access problems to yeast and ingredients, but they've got some raw ingredients of the fruit. And once they start getting acid levels and learning how to acidify the beer and balance the beer with the fruit, you're going to find, and I think the same thing's going to happen in Southeast Asia also with all their fruit. You're going to find some of the greatest sour beers in the world, the most flavorful sour beers in the world, coming out of that section of the world, because they've got so many things to play with that we just don't have a chance to do. And they still get all the blueberries and strawberries, but then I wish I could remember some names of fruit. I was tasting. It's like, are you kidding me? This is unbelievable, They were just every morning. One of the judges would they'd go to the fresh market, bring me another fruit. I was almost afraid to eat it because I figured I'd end up with Montezuma's Revenge, but didn't have that problem, and it was quite amazing. But we were talking about Pilsners, and you were telling me about your experience with, I was going to say the next podcast is going to be called Pilsner. We're going to have Ashley Carter, who I got to meet down in Peru, from Beer Stout Lager House, who does the slow pour pills, and she's going to talk the first half of the podcast about how she makes a proper pills. The second half of the podcast is going to be Jeff Mello and maybe Levi Fried from Long Beach Beer Lab to make the Fa Pilsner, because we are Milk the Funk and we're using Kvike yeast,
Sure.
Oslo, Scar, some of the other yeast to make people are using that to make a lager. And so then the second half of the podcast, they're going to describe their thing. Then we're going to have them discuss a little bit about traditional versus alternative. So it's an idea I thought that's time to come. Pilsner is such a big part of the beer world right now, especially the sour beer world, because once we get done drinking sour beer, we're drinking Pilsners and lagers.
And then we'll
Okay.
go back again.
Huh?
And then we'll go back.
Hopefully, yeah. But you were discussing some things you read about brewing with the 3470 Germinelli yeast.
Well, I actually was introduced to it when I was out at the last collaboration at Wicks Brewing in Riverside, and Ryan Wicks, who's brewing there, he's
And
also,
Jeff Mello is watching, so I just mentioned your name, Jeff. Hey.
he's also the owner, and he's had started using a process using Weihenstephan 3470 strain at near ale temperatures, and he only did it. He's I think he's a mechanical engineer by education or something like that. Very process oriented, and he voracious reader of anything about brewing. So he had I think about 3 Pilsners on tap that were that he's playing and using the process of that specific strain, and he only started doing it because he was watching, and I've read the studies as well as I can remember. Brulosophy type guys, and I think it may have been Brulosophy itself. They brewed a Pilsner at classic Pilsner fermentation temperatures, and they brewed it at 60 degrees all the way through. They double blind tested them, and people could not tell the difference really. And those that could tell the difference could not say which was the classic and which was not. And then they did it at 50 degrees and 70 degrees. Same results. Nothing statistical, triple blind test. The Pilsner was still, recognized as a Pilsner, couldn't tell which one was hot fermented. When they got to 75 degrees, that's when they could tell the difference. That's my recollection of the study. So at Wick's Brewing, I had some of their Pilsners. They're terrific Pilsners, and he does everything else right in the process too. He's using the right enzymes to reduce diacetyl. He's using the right stuff to clarify gorgeous, clear Pilsners. And I said, okay, I don't really believe that. I don't trust that. I know he's doing it, but I'm going to take it home and do it. So I brewed an Italian Pilsner with 3470 at 70 degrees all the way through, about 70% attenuation up to 72, and then dry hop for a little bit, cold crashed it, and the beer was 16 days from kettle to packaging, and I force carved it, and it's amazing beer. It's a Pilsner. There's nothing wrong with it. During the fermentation, I mentioned
You get the grains. It's got everything's right.
well, it's a baseline again, right? So basically 100% Weyermann Pilsner, German Magnum for bittering. That's
Yep.
and then Czech Saaz and Opal at Whirlpool and for dry hopping. 1.2 pounds per barrel roughly at dry hopping.
So you dry hop your Pilsner.
Yeah, Italian Pilsner means the story I got from my friend who's an advanced cicerone. Hey Charlie, he is basically in Italy they were making classic German Pilsners, but they weren't getting the same brightness that they were getting. Maybe it was a difference in water, difference in process, or something like that. And somebody said, okay, I'm going to bring that brightness back in by freshening with dry hops. And that's where the Italian Pilsner was born, because it's not really Italian, but that's their interpretation. So it's a really great style, and I think my feeling and Charlie's feeling as well is brewers getting tired of hazies and all these other things. They're just pounding their palate or sours. They're turning to things like this where they can do a creative interpretation of a classic old style that has just a wonderful base and pick up the hops and freshness, and you still get, like you could use Loral from Germany or something that has some more fruitiness or more melony, and a nice new fresh interpretation of Pilsner.
So you did not, I just want to make sure, I'm going to ask this question because I asked this question last night, but for everybody, you did not lager.
Nope.
You just kept it in the 70-degree range. And
So-
do you have to do anything for a diacetyl rest or anything like that?
So basically, the first 4 days was at 70 degrees, controlled exactly at 70 degrees, and a whole bunch of sulfur blow off. And that was it's a weird thing in trust, right? So I'm doing this process I haven't done before with a lager yeast. I go out and all this sulfur aroma is coming off, and I go, oh crap. It's a myth, right? It's not going to work. But after about 4 days, and I brought it up to 72. My understanding is you don't need to do that because diacetyl rest for a lager yeast is about 68 anyway, right? And then I like to dry hop at around 68 to 70. So I just let it rest until I got to 3 days from packaging, dry hopped, cold crashed it, and packaged.
It's good.
Little green in the first like 3 or 4 days, or to almost the end of the first week after packaging. But after that, it's really nice.
This is one thing I learned when I was listening to Ashley down in Peru, and I asked her the question. She was going through her process, and she does lager, but she doesn't do a diacetyl rest. And I said, really? And she goes, no. What's the need? If you have, I think her thing is if you have enough yeast, healthy yeast in there, there's no need to do it. So this is really going to be. I cannot wait to do this podcast because we're going to have different ways. We've heard how you've talked about it today. We're going to hear.
And I'm not the expert.
And Ashley, Beer Scott Lager House, their slow pour Pils is considered one of the top lagers and pilsners in the country and in the world, maybe even. It's fantastic beer. and she insists that the beer's poured in the proper glass, and so it's a lot of fun. She's a lot of fun to talk to. She's great on interviews. She was just interviewed by John Hall on the podcast Drink Beer, Think Beer. That's a fantastic podcast. Just didn't get too much into her process there. We're gonna bust her process. She gave her process and all her recipes down in Peru. She said she's going to give them to us, so we're going to get them over the podcast. Also, just advertising. HomebrewCon is coming to Nashville, Tennessee, June 18th through 20th. Milk the Funk the podcast has been picked to be one of the sessions. So you guys, all you homebrewers out there, Nashville, Tennessee is a great place to come to. When the tickets go on sale, get your tickets. Come down to Nashville. Come hang out. Drink a lot of great beer. We got a lot of great breweries in Nashville. The Opryland Hotel is a place that you won't believe if you haven't ever been there before. I mean, you've got boats. You can go and take a boat tour inside the hotel, and it's a fantastic thing. So you homebrewers and anybody in the Nashville, Tennessee area or anywhere who can get here for the HomebrewCon, come on down and meet all the people from Milk the Funk the podcast. Jeff Mellow's watching. He and Bootleg Biology, which he owns, are going to host a Milk the Funk bottle share. We're going to help out with Milk the Funk, and we'll again do the.
And that's always a good event.
Yeah, and we're going to have, and it's going to be at Bootleg Biology, I believe. Well, I'm not sure. We're going to wait on that to find out for sure. But we're going to collect yeast from everybody's bottles, and we're going to have as he does every year, the Milk the Funk HomebrewCon yeast blend that they'll sell later on after they're able to culture it up and get enough packets. So come on down. So where were we? We're done with Pilsners. So if there's no more questions.
I think what's going to happen with the Pilsners, and especially Italian Pilsner, I think there's going to be a little bit of a marriage between what people are doing with the New England IPAs and Pilsners. Now, it's divergent style, but I think some of the things people are learning from New England IPAs, like hopping while it's still fermenting, so you don't get hop creep and stuff like that. I think some of those techniques that were learned are going to be brought back to the style, and it just be really clean and fresh.
One of the easiest ones we've done is, of course, you were talking about the yeast pitch and everything. It was basically almost a smash. It was just Pilsner with a little bit of Carapils in there, and we didn't add a single hop at all to it. And it's gonna be fun when we start talking about the Caviques. And Hornadol is actually what we use. We overcharged it, of course, and you didn't get all the fruit or the whatever that you get. I mean, it just totally fermented out, very clean and it didn't get a single hop until flame out, and it was amazing. But years ago, me and my wife were going to Epcot, and it was before we even started seeing unfiltered pills around here and whatnot. And they were bringing them in there. I mean, it was a food and wine festival, and I was amazed. I was like, what's all this unfiltered pill stuff? Everything was cloudy and everything. So exactly what you're saying about that marriage and where it's going. I mean, it's kind of already here, and I think it's just going to go further with it. So it's a good, not a blending of styles, but it just doesn't matter anymore about that clear.
The clarity thing has always been a German. It's been a German thing that is visually they like.
But it's over. They're sending them to the Food and Wine Festival, at Epcot, and they're getting beers there that you won't even find anywhere else around. We definitely don't get here.
When I was in Charlotte, North
Now
Carolina.
we're about the flavor. We like it.
When I was in Charlotte, North Carolina last year, I was down there interviewing, and I forget his name, from Wooden Robot, a fantastic brewery in Charlotte. And they had a farmhouse lager on tap and it was just basically, it was everything that you're supposed to do in a lager, except they added some triticale to it. And it was a little bit cloudy, but the flavors, it was still clean and crisp, but the body that the triticale added to it, I mean, it didn't change it from being a Pilsner, but it was just different than just classical clean Pilsner. So, and it was, I went back. It was one of those beers that I went back the next day and got a $60 ticket because I parked in the wrong place. They actually take pictures. They send you the ticket. They got a picture, so you can't argue. I was going to argue. I was like, no, I guess I can't argue, can I? There's a sign that says, "Do not go past the sign." I was about that far past the sign, and it was on a picture. I said, I can't argue that. Okay, Dan Pitchley has confirmed that the Milk the Funk meetup will be at HomebrewCon. Will be at Bootleg Biology. We're waiting for the schedule. The American Homebrewers Association has not given us a schedule for the sessions, so And I know that Jeff is doing a couple sessions. They're doing one on Oslo, I believe, and a couple other ones.
Have you used that yeast yet?
Huh?
Have you used Oslo yet?
Yeah, I did, and that's why I can't wait to talk with Jeff. And our attempt at using Oslo ended up being very fruity.
Yeah. I've got it bought, but I haven't used it yet.
Yeah,
You guys underpitch a little bit typically to try to bring out.
Yeah, we
some
underpitch
flavor.
per the recommendations, and
I do as well with the Vikes.
Huh?
I do with the Vikes as well, under pitch.
yeah,
High temp, 105 is what I shoot for.
Wow.
I used a lot.
yeah, we were probably at 89 or 88.
When we're doing our IPAs, we're like over pitching high temp. I mean, we want to knock it out and be, clean. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and but we got a fruit bomb. It was a great beer. It's fun, tasting beer, but it wasn't. We were shooting for a kind of a farmhouse. I mean, it was a lager, but it was kind of a farmhouse lager. But so that's one thing I can't wait. The next podcast they're going to talk about Oslo, and I'm going to try to bring Levi in from Long Beach because he's brewing a clean Pilsner lager out there that everybody's raving about using the Oslo strain, and he's done a couple other podcasts on this. And one thing we're finding out a little bit about the pH is, the Kvaik says that you're having to monitor. He's watching his minerals and all that because the pHs on Kvaik drop pretty fast. Matter of fact, Alex and I noticed on the one we did, it wasn't sour, but it was. You could definitely taste that. And after we heard the podcast, he goes, "That's what it was. The pH wasn't low enough to be sour, but it was getting down in the 4 range probably." And that's what he says. He actually monitors his pH as the beer's coming out, and he'll add. And I can't remember exactly what mineral that he's adding to the beer to make calcium.
Calcium carbonate?
Yeah, probably calcium carbonate to raise the pH in the mash while he's pouring it off, so it doesn't. Because he says he's noticed it. And then I've read some other anecdotal anecdotal readings on Milk of Funk and some other boards where they're talking about that the pH is a little bit lower, and that's something we're still learning about Kvaik. We have a lot of people at Milk of Funk that complain about Kvaik. That's all that we see on Milk of Funk. That's why we introduced.
I don't care.
That's why we introduced.
I'm excited about this new book coming out too.
Yeah.
By the way.
Oh yeah, Lars
Sure.
Garsol's book. I mentioned that book was on sale for Amazon, and I think they pre-sold 1,000 copies. Just like that. And it's pretty amazing. But that's why we introduced or allowing non-alcoholic beer to be talked about now. That's the next frontier in the beer world, I believe. It's in Europe now. 10% of the beer bought is non-alcoholic. Now, we won't let you talk about if you're using a dealkalizer. We don't care about that. That's cheating. But there are some new yeast out there, some new fermentation techniques that people are using that. So we're going to allow that talking because it's going to be something that you're going to have to brew, And as we've done with Milk to Funk, we're going to make sure you do it right. We're gonna science the shit out of it, as Matt Damon said. And,
if it's an alternative brewing technique or something new, we're going to introduce it.
Yeah, and
it's,
we're going to
it's
do
not
it.
our fault if it goes mainstream.
Yeah.
But maybe it is.
There was a discussion on Milk to Funk not long ago, and talking about how so many people are making good sours nowadays, but a lot of people saying they all taste the same because we're all getting from the same. People are passing around the same yeast strains, and it's kind of getting
I'm still
homogenous.
not going to Kelsar.
Yeah, well, it's got not just Kelsar, but even that. But it's got kind of homogenous. It's even the mixed fermentation because we're sharing strains. The strains are being sold by the labs. We're passing strains along. People are grabbing one bottle. It's got and they built it up from somebody else's bottle, and it's just part of it. And I told them it's a big long thing. And I said I blame Milk to Funk. We told everybody how to do it right. We're breaking the myths. We're getting rid of the myths, and that's why it's such a popular site. And I learn something every time I get to talk to a brewer. That's one of the things I like to do, these live podcasts or go talk to somebody in Milk to Funk. I learn something new, the process, and it's a fun thing. We're kind of getting along right now. Let's see.
That Magnum is left.
Huh?
A Magnum with a wild mixed culture.
Yeah, we got some beer in there. Yeah.
Somebody.
You want to talk? You can talk about this beer before we sign off here.
All right.
We're at about an hour and a half, so.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, hopefully there's more left.
Yeah, it should be.
Oh, is it? It's all gone?
Dave's been drinking on it.
That was a fun beer. So, yeah,
There's some left, yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah, I talked about the yeast that was isolated that we used at the brewery today at Bonsai's Theoretical. This is I did a wild capture mixed culture from another fruit in my backyard in July, and brewed a beer. This is with basically a third generation crop up from the wild capture. So I had a fun time with this one. Try it. But yeah, they asked me about the process, and I'm not a science guy, and I don't have the equipment, but I have a nose and I have eyes and stuff like that, and maybe someday I'll kill myself doing this kind of thing. But you see I see what looks like yeast on the skin of the fruit, and I put it in 100 milliliters of wort, let it sit for about 75 to 80 for 2 days to see if mold is produced, or see if any off flavors are produced, or aromas, and also to prove that there's fermentation going on, because you see little bubbles. If it gets to 24 hours and it doesn't smell bad, it doesn't look bad or anything like that, then I put on a stir plate, finish it out, decant it, and prop it up. Second prop, I always use 40 IBUs. So I'm eliminating bacteria or organisms that don't like a brew house. Then I prop it up again, and if it's still, everything still looks good, then I brew a batch. This is an
And
example.
that was just what you cultured right there.
Yeah, that's a wild mixed culture from fruit in my backyard. So I have a lucky backyard.
So you do.
Yes.
Before we go, because I want to thank the people who came, and I've done this before. When people come and they have breweries they're thinking about opening, go ahead, introduce yourself, talk a little bit about the brewery you're going to brew in, what type of beer you're going to do.
My name is Rick Lowe. Our brewery is Rubidium Brewing
In Murfreesboro.
in Murfreesboro. I've been brewing about 25 years. It's kind of been on the fence about going pro these past few years, so I think we're setting it in motion now and should have something open hopefully by summertime. So we have a location set and everything else. We're just working on TTP and all the fun stuff. But I like brewing a lot of classic German lagers, so I'm into the lager stuff. But on the other end, I love the white yeast. This past year and a half, about 90% of the beers I've been making have been Gewike, Boss, the Hormedial, did some Oslo, just some random stuff. So
When you brewed with Oslo, did you brew a lager or?
no, I actually just did it. I do some New Englands with that.
Okay, yeah. So
Yeah.
did you get a big fruit cut from
Oh, yeah,
from the yeast?
yeah.
Yeah. That's-
And I like to underpitch,
Yeah.
so it's literally teaspoon. A 5-gallon batch teaspoon in a 1-barrel system. You're looking at maybe 3 teaspoons. Or tablespoons. You don't need a lot.
Wow.
Like I said, I'll pump that temperature up to at least 90 to 105.
Before we go here, I'm going to jump over to the Milk. Dan says a lot of people are watching on the Milk the Funk page. So I'm going to see if there's any questions over there, because I've been monitoring the podcast page, and we are co-streaming this on the Milk the Funk page. I'm able to do that now.
There's a bad question, sweet God.
So you get the sweetness off this? This is like 0.997 finish. And it's the yeast that comes from my backyard. It has a sweet.
It doesn't taste
perception.
below
It's
one
not
there.
dry.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not
Yeah.
dry at all.
It's pretty crazy. That's why I think
But I didn't think it was overly sweet. It's right where it should be.
I drink a lot of really dry beer. So for me, the perception of sweetness at the end is pretty.
John Hall has asked, "How does that work?" And I'm not sure what he's talking about.
The internet is a series of pipes.
So I don't know what question he's responded to that, whether he's talking about the camera that I'm interviewing with, or talking about a process. I'll get with John, and I'll.
How many minutes ago was it?
It doesn't say on here. If my laptop might say, but it's one of the first questions that was asked over there, and it said. Then I saw where you posted. I'm about to be over there. Oh, Richard Gass, and he's a friend of mine, a customer of mine, actually in the real world, the steel business, up in Indiana. He asked, "Are there any good reference materials for aromatics in beer?"
That's a really good question. And all my background for aromatics and stuff comes from like I said, little chef training and then cooking I cook all kinds of different cuisines for a long time, and understanding how they're going to affect a beer, any aromatic. Like I said, I talked about, if you don't know what it's going to do, make a tea. And if you don't know what two of them together is going to do, make a tea with two of them, or mix them or something like that. And that's why when you build your palette, when it gets really broad, then you can do something crazy like we did today and say, okay, we're going to put kumquats with cardamom and a hop that expresses wintergreen or mint, right? Then you go, okay, oh, those are going to work. Those are going to work right. But there are books about pairing beer and pairing wine with food and stuff like that, and they have a lot to do with it. And you're talking about things that you bring flavors and aromatics together. Are they contrasting? And when they contrast, do they create interest or do they crush it? When they complement, do they complement too much and you're not getting complexity, right? So those are there are books that talk about that. And I think that'd be a great look at books about pairing wine and food, and books about pairing beer and food, how you do it correctly, and then you'll understand. You're doing the same thing in a beer. You're just doing it in one container rather than in two different things.
Ryan, any updates that you want to talk about while we're on the line?
Updates to no.
Okay. All right. We'll just let that ride.
We'll let it ride on.
Yeah, okay. Daniel, if somebody is interested in commissioning you to do a beer for them or talk to them about doing a beer, where can they find you?
I'm easy. I have a webpage. It's beancurdturtle.com. It's like the 3 words, but they're all stuck together. There's a story about that.
No, you got to tell the story, yeah.
No, I'm not going to tell the story. It's a little bit profane, and but it's actually on one of the hidden pages on the website. I think it's in the blog somewhere. But beancurdturtle.com talks about really what I do in designing beers for breweries or doing collaborations. Or you can email me at daniel@beancurdturtle.com, or check the Facebook page, which is Bean Curd Turtle on Facebook, and message me. So I'm easy. I like going places, working with people, and trying good beer. So.
And Nuno, thank you for the questions you asked. And I see that you're from Portugal. I didn't miss that earlier. And it's got to be, maybe it's getting early in the morning in Portugal. So thanks for either staying up or getting up early to watch the podcast. Hey, I want to thank everybody who tuned in, asked the questions. We still have a lot of beer left and some food to finish up here. So we're going to sign off. I may be doing another one of these Wednesday or Thursday in Kentucky. We're trying to get the schedule. I'll post on Milk the Funk, the podcast, and Milk the Funk if we do this. Trying to get it together because I'm going to be traveling that way for business this week. And just ran into talking to somebody. I thought, hey, why not? These are a lot of fun. I always learn a lot about beer at these things. So, hey, thanks again. We're out of here.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Sure.